Hello, this is Greg from SharePoint Maven, and in this video I would like to show you some admin settings you should configure in your SharePoint Online environment. So let me explain to you why I decided to record this particular tutorial. Every time I work with my clients, so whenever my clients ask me to configure, let's say, an internet portal for them, or maybe some document management system, any type of SharePoint site, once they grant me access to their environment, once they make me the SharePoint admin in their tenant, the first thing that I do is navigate to the SharePoint Admin Center and configure some very important settings. So what I would like to do today, what I decided to do in this tutorial is share a total of 15 settings you must configure or at least validate and take a look at within your SharePoint Online environment. Now, depending on your specific use case, some of those settings might not even be relevant, but I still decided to include them in this particular tutorial. And obviously, since we are going to be configuring SharePoint admin settings, the prerequisite is, in order to implement those settings in your environment, you do need to have a SharePoint admin role assigned to your account. Now, the reason I chose the specific admin settings that I'm about to show you is because these settings, in my opinion, will help make your environment a bit more secure. Those settings will help you and assist you with governance within your organization, and in my opinion, will just help make SharePoint a little bit more user-friendly and efficient for your end users and easier to maintain for you, the SharePoint admin. So the first step, let's go ahead and navigate to the SharePoint Admin Center. As I mentioned already, you do need to have the SharePoint admin role, at least, assigned to your account. You don't really need to be a global Microsoft 365 admin. SharePoint admin role is more than enough because most of those settings that I'm about to show you, they only require SharePoint admin role. So to do that, to navigate to the admin center, you click on 9 dots in the upper left-hand corner, the Microsoft 365 app launcher, and you click on admin. And this is, of course, is a Microsoft 365 Admin Center. Now, in my tenant, I do have access to the other admin centers as well because I'm set up as a Microsoft 365 admin in my, obviously, in my tenant. But the admin center we want is the SharePoint Admin Center. So let's click here. And that's pretty much it. We now navigated to SharePoint Admin Center. This is what you get to see right now on the screen. So the first setting we need to configure is the time zone. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but when you create, let's say, new sites in SharePoint, the time zone, the default time zone is actually in Pacific Standard Time in US. And the reason for that is because Microsoft's headquarters are on the West Coast, and I think that's probably the reason why the time zone always defaults to Pacific. However, if let's say the company is on East Coast, right, you will still have the default time of the site to be the Pacific one. So what that means is that let's say you upload some documents and under modified or created columns, the system columns, it might display, pretty much a wrong timestamp, right? It might be off by a few hours. However, what's important to note is that the timestamp of, let's say, modified, date is always calculated based on the user settings of the people who are logged in. Every single licensed user within your Microsoft 365, they can configure their own time zone settings. So for example, you might have a user on the East Coast, you might have a user on the West Coast, or maybe you might have a user located in Europe. Doesn't really matter. The time, the timestamp will always display correctly, no matter what the setting is, whatever the setting is for the site, the time zone will always display correctly based on the regional settings that the user has chosen for themselves within their account. We still need to configure this setting though and adjust the time zone in Admin Center, and let me tell you why. If the user is unlicensed, right? So first of all, you might have some users who do not have a license in your environment. They can still access essentially the sites without a license, but they cannot configure their own time zone because they don't have a Microsoft 365 license. That would be use case number one. The second use case would be external sharing. When you share, let's say, a document externally, external users do not have a license, right? And again, they cannot configure, they cannot tell SharePoint what their time zone is. So in those cases, it will pretty much default to the site time zone. So if you do want that time, the date and time to display, correctly, essentially this is something you need to adjust. So let me now show you how to adjust that default time zone for your organization. So once again, we are in the SharePoint Admin Center. You need to click on Settings. And once you do, we will actually spend a bit of time on this area. This is where most of the settings are configured within SharePoint Admin Center. But what you want to click is Site Creation. And when you, let's say, have a brand new tenant, by default, it will display Pacific time zone, all right? But you can change it to whatever it is. I'm actually personally located in Boston, Massachusetts, so I'm on Eastern time zone, so that's what I selected. Obviously, if you have users all over the world, all over the country, in different time zones, I suggest maybe choosing the time zone where maybe most of the employees are, because once again, I'm going to repeat this. No matter what you set up here, at the end of the day, the time zone is always based on whatever the users configured within their own accounts. And let me actually just show you quickly where that is configured. So I'm going to click now on Settings and Privacy. And under time zone right here, as you can see, let's say if I, relocate maybe to another time zone, I can easily, change that. And from that point on, all the, dates and times will display in the proper time zone. But every single licensed user can set their own time zone settings as well. The next setting we are going to tweak is the site creation. Now, personally, I actually prefer to leave it on. But at the end of the day, especially if you're part maybe of a large organization, you probably don't want users creating their own SharePoint sites, right? You probably want to have some sort of process within your organization. Let me first show you what we are going to tweak. So if I navigate to SharePoint start page, obviously I'm going to see all these different sites I'm part of. And one of the options in the upper left-hand corner you're going to see is the ability to create a site. And this setting is turned on by default. So by default, any user within your organization can create their own team sites and communication sites. In case if you want to disable this capability, so if you want to pretty much remove this option to create sites, here's what you need to do. You need to navigate to SharePoint Admin Center. It's actually the same option, site creation right here. Same place where we set up the time zone. And just like that, you can pretty much disable this option. Uncheck the box, click Save, and it usually takes half an hour or so for it to take effect, but then this Create a Site button will be gone. Now, you can also maybe leave this alone, but you can also disable site creation from OneDrive. If the user is logged into their OneDrive for Business, they do have an option to create new libraries from there as well. And you can actually be very specific and say, you know what, our users are okay creating a site from SharePoint start page, but not from OneDrive. So you can actually uncheck this box only and click Save, and those changes will take effect within 30 minutes or so. Now, it is very important that the only ability you pretty much disable is the ability to create sites from this start page. The users can still create, and that's very important, the users can still create new teams and teams, which ultimately will create new SharePoint sites. They can still create new groups from Outlook. They can still create new plans from Planner. And in all of those cases, essentially the sites, the SharePoint sites will be created. So very, very important is that this option only disables the ability to create sites from the SharePoint start page. It does not prevent the ability to create new teams, planners, groups from those applications. The next setting we need to configure, and lately it's less of an issue, I guess, but it's still happening. So I always like to adjust that setting. But the next setting we need to configure is the ability to create subsites. So the right way to create sites in modern SharePoint would be essentially by clicking this option, right, and creating the modern sites, either a team site or communication site. And what will happen once you do that, let me actually navigate. I mean, essentially it will create, if it's, let's say, a team site, it would create a team site, a modern team site, or a modern communication site based on whatever it is that you have chosen. So this is actually the right way to create sites, because the sites created this way are part of a modern or flat site architecture. Essentially, each and every site gets its own address, gets its own URL, and essentially there is no sub-site architecture in this particular case. It's not like a HR site exists under the intranet site. All the sites reside on the same level. That's what we call a modern flat architecture. However, what unfortunately still happens sometimes, the users, instead of creating the modern sites, they actually create subsites. And let me show you what they usually do, and then I'll show you the setting we need to tweak. So what ends up happening is, let's say they have a site, and they go to gear icon, site contents, and this is where, of course, you see all other, essentially all the contents of your site, and they click on subsite, and then they click new subsite. And I don't have any subsites existing at the moment, but I can create one just like that. And what ends up happening, it's you probably noticed it's a very different looking screen that you saw, in terms of site creation. And the reason for that is because it actually creates a subsite. All right, so it's like a parent, child hierarchy. So it creates a subsite under the site, under this particular site. And this is how we created sites many, many years ago when we still had classic SharePoint. And this would be the wrong way to create essentially a new sites, because we no longer create sites this way. We no longer create subsites because of permissions inheritance, because of the fact that they are not connected to Microsoft 365 groups and teams. Essentially, you are getting old-fashioned subsites that we had back like in 2015 or something. So this is wrong. This is wrong. But unfortunately, this feature is enabled out of the box. All right. Unfortunately, this is still available now. This feature is probably, you kind of have to find this feature, right? If you worked with all the versions of SharePoint, so you probably know how to navigate and how to create subsites. But still, I prefer to kind of disable that capability. It's not something that essentially users should be doing with the modern hub site flat architecture that we have. So let me show you what you need to do in this particular case. From the SharePoint Admin Center again, from Settings tab, It's not going to appear in any of those settings. It's actually like a classic, setting. So you have to click on this classic settings page over here. And once this classic settings page loads, by the way, this is how we tweaked admin settings many, many years ago. But essentially, you need to scroll pretty much all the way down. And under subsite creation, you will notice it says enable subsite creation for all sites. And you can pretty much disable it, all right? All right, you can do something in between, I guess, where um, you will still be able to create subsites for classic sites, but I don't know why you would even do that. There should be no more classic sites at all. And anyway, in any case, you want to choose this option, disable subsite creation for all sites, and click OK. And once you do, essentially what will happen, it usually takes, I think, 30 minutes or so for it to take effect, but this subsite option will disappear. The next setting I would like to show you might be a bit unique. It's only applicable if you utilize metadata within your organization. But in case you do, you are probably using the SharePoint term store. And what I'm talking about is essentially this term store over here under content services. And essentially what a term store is, and I devoted a number of posts on my blog and I have many, many videos on my YouTube channel, but essentially this is like a global database of labels that you can use and reuse within your organization. However, term store in SharePoint has its own essentially a security and permission setup. Even though you are the admin of SharePoint and have SharePoint admin role, you are not by default going to be able to do anything within the term store. By default, you will pretty much be a read-only user. You will not be able to add any, term sets or add any terms or import metadata in here. It's read-only. So what you will need to do, and I have already done that in my tenant, you will need to add your name under the SharePoint term store admin. So the way you do it, you just click on the edit button, and I already added essentially myself a long time ago. But for example, I want Mary to also be the SharePoint admin, who will have access to the term store as well. And you would need to click save. And essentially, these are the people who will be able to add, edit, delete anything within the SharePoint term store. Now, obviously, this is very important. Whoever you add here, they do need to be the SharePoint admins as well, because otherwise they will not be able to navigate to this area, right, without being the SharePoint admins in the first place. So make sure the people you add here, including yourself, I mean, obviously, right, you need to have access to the SharePoint admin role as well. The next setting we need to configure or mostly check is the one where you set up your external sharing policies. Let me explain. So let's first navigate to the setting under policies on the left, click on sharing. Now you're going to see a number of settings here, most of which we will cover in this tutorial, but the focus of this particular one is on this area right here. So by default, essentially Microsoft allows external sharing from both SharePoint and OneDrive. And the highest level of sharing is anonymous. Essentially, anyone can, you can share with anyone inside or outside the organization. Now, I actually prefer to leave this setting on just like that by default. Why? Because you can control whether a certain site can be shared externally, essentially on a side-by-side basis. However, in case your organization maybe does not want any external sharing at all on any of the sites, in these cases, you will need to pretty much downgrade it. All right. Sometimes, you might need to maybe set it up just like that, where you do not allow any external sharing at all, or maybe you want to allow external sharing maybe with existing guests, or, in this particular case, you do allow external sharing in your tenant, you just don't allow anonymous, right? Essentially, the users need to sign in with their account or a temporary verification code. Now, you probably already noticed you can actually configure different settings for SharePoint sites versus OneDrive for Business. All right, so maybe on SharePoint you pretty much allow new and existing guests, and maybe OneDrive you don't allow any external sharing at all. It is very important that essentially, yeah, you cannot have OneDrive to be more permissive, I guess, than SharePoint. And the reason for that is because OneDrive, right, pretty much relies on the SharePoint. It's like each user gets their own SharePoint site almost to store their private documents. So that's why essentially, yeah, this cannot be more permissive than the SharePoint bar on the left. But long story short, whatever setting you choose, I mean, this is configured here. Now, very important, if you disable, let's say you totally disable external sharing in your organization, essentially it affects all the sites. All right, so this is like the main switch, if you will. So if you do not allow any external sharing, that means you cannot enable it on one side or two sides. It's all or nothing. So if you do maybe want to restrict external sharing on certain sites, maybe then you kind of have to leave it open here globally and then disable it on certain sites on a side-by-side basis. The next setting I'm about to show you actually does require you to be a global Microsoft 365 admin. The SharePoint, if you're just a SharePoint admin, this is not enough. And the reason for that is because the setting I'm about to show you is this global theme. So what I'm talking about is this horizontal bar all the way at the top of any SharePoint site. And while you can control the branding, the theme for for your SharePoint sites, this top bar where the essentially where the logo appears and the color scheme here are controlled at the Microsoft 365 level. And the beauty about this bar is, let's say you navigate to your OneDrive account. All right, this bar kind of stays consistent. All right, it travels with you, and it allows you to, first of all, it maintains branding, but also you can easily maybe click on that logo. It's a clickable logo, and you can get back to your intranet from anywhere. Outlook, OneDrive, SharePoint, and so on. So how do we configure that? For that, we need to navigate to Microsoft 365 Admin Center, and again, obviously, you do need to be the global admin. SharePoint admin role is not enough. And then what you want to click on is Settings tab, and then Org Settings, and then Organization Profile, and then Custom Themes. And this is where you configure your theme. You can actually add multiple themes for different use cases for different sets of users. I have already configured one in my tenant in my environment. This is where essentially you upload your logo that sits here. And this is a clickable logo, so you can actually maybe point it to your intranet. And under the Colors tab, this is where you set up the default, colors according to your brand, essentially. All right, and that's pretty much it. So this is where you configure it all, and on this general tab, you can actually specify. By default, users can actually override and add their own horizontal bar with their own color, theme. If you want to prevent that, there is a checkbox for that. But other than that, I mean, that's pretty much it. This is where you configure it. Once you do, it does take some time for it to propagate and take effect, but I think up to 24 hours or something. So, but after that, all the users will see the consistent, bar with your logo, company's logo, and your brand color appearing all the way on the top. The next setting that I like to configure is essentially the ability to create comments on pages. Let me explain to you what I'm talking about. So I'm here on this human resources site, and when users create new pages, or new news post. So let me maybe click on this one. I already have this article, this news post. This is the area I'm talking about. So essentially, users can comment on pages, they can comment on news posts, just like that. They can mention other people, and so on. Now, the site owners can actually disable this capability, pretty much at the site level, at the page level. They can actually prevent comments. However, if you want to disable it globally, you have to do it from the SharePoint Admin Center. And in my opinion, these comments are kind of useless. I mean, in my opinion, all the conversations should be happening within Microsoft Teams or maybe Viva Engage. But in my opinion, those comments, they're kind of, they always appear at the bottom, of that news post, and most of the users might not even, read them or notice them. In my opinion, this is not the most user-friendly feature. So if you want to disable this globally for the whole organization, once again, you can do so. You need to navigate to SharePoint Admin Center under Pages right here. And this is the checkbox you want to uncheck. So by default, the comments are on. If you uncheck the box, click Save, essentially they will be disabled globally for the whole organization within several hours. The next setting, I personally never really bother about the specific setting, but some of my clients do, so I'm going to show it to you. But it has to do with the ability to set storage limits for sites. So by default, you as an organization, you are allocated to a certain storage space. So in my case, it's just a bit over 1 TB, but depending on how big your organization is, right? In number of employees, number of users you have, you might have 2, 3, 5, 10 TB of storage. Now, this storage is shared among all of the sites. And the way it works, you can have like, I don't know, one site with 500 gigabytes or one site with 3 TB of data and maybe another site with just few gigabytes. So it's all shared, right? It's the total that counts. In some cases, I have some clients who, don't want maybe some site owners or site members uploading terabytes and terabytes of data to their site because they will pretty much eat up all the storage allocated to the entire organization. So if you want to essentially put the limits on how much content can be added, how much storage you will be taking on your site, here's what you need to do. So you need to navigate once again to the settings tab and under site storage limits. So by default, it's automatic, meaning essentially it's the total that counts, right? You can pretty much, as long as you are not over the overall limit, you're okay. However, you can set it to manual. And what will happen is, let me show you what will happen. So you set it to manual, click save. And essentially, what that means now is that if I go to my active sites, so you will be able, so let me actually create a brand new site. First of all, remember that default time zone that was set up globally. This is it. You see, by default, it accepts the global setting. But this is the extra field you get now. And essentially, you can say, I only want this site, 100 gigabytes max. All right. So you can actually set it up once you create the site. For all the existing sites, what you will need to do is click the checkbox and click storage. This is the extra icon you now get. And once again, you can set up whatever the limit is. And here's another cool feature. You can actually set up this alert. All right. And what will happen is the site owners will be notified when they're approaching the limit. And you can set maybe, when we approach, when we used up 80% on the site, send us an email. Again, this is a nice little feature you get, and the email will be sent to all the site owners of the site. The next setting I would like to show you has to do with OneDrive for Business. So OneDrive for Business, as you probably already know, is the user's personal repository in the cloud. This is where the users store their documents, privately and securely. But here's the deal. When the user leaves the organization, their OneDrive account is deleted. And because each user has their own account tied to their account, essentially Microsoft 365 account, their user ID, once the user leaves the organization, once you delete the user from, the SharePoint, Microsoft 365 Admin Center, once you delete those users from here, their OneDrive account is gone as well. And by default, it's deleted within 30 days. You can actually tweak that setting, and let me show you how. So once again, we navigate to SharePoint Admin Center, and right here under OneDrive retention. So just like that, you see, by default it's 30 days. You can actually increase it to 10 years, 3,650 days. But whatever you set in here, I mean, that's what the new setting will be. But very important to note, by default, it's only 30 days. Let's say you have your Microsoft 365 account with hundreds of employees. As soon as somebody retires, you maybe delete the account within Microsoft 365, the OneDrive will be deleted in 30 days. So make sure to tweak that setting to maybe something more, higher than 30, so you have a chance to maybe copy the data and access all the information. Make sure there is nothing important there. But by default, once again, it's only 30 days. This next setting also has to do with OneDrive for Business. So the users obviously can access their OneDrive for Business through this web interface, but most users will probably synchronize it locally to their Windows Explorer. And the way they do it is by clicking on the gear icon, sync this OneDrive. Um, in most cases, I suggest you leave it alone, but I do have some clients that do not want users to sync anything locally on their computer. So essentially what we are going to do now is disable this option. Disable this option. And let me show you how to do that. So once again, we need to navigate to SharePoint Admin Center. And again, under OneDrive, right here, sync, just like that. You can pretty much uncheck this box. By default, syncing is available, syncing is on. You just uncheck the box, click save, and essentially this option will not be available. It is very important to know that this option I just showed you only disables sync for OneDrive for Business. It does not get rid of this sync button that you see at the SharePoint document library level. There is a way, to disable the sync button. I actually recorded a number of videos on my YouTube channel, but the site owners can disable the sync button at the site level or even the library level. But very important that this option I showed you from the SharePoint Admin Center only disables the ability to synchronize OneDrive for Business, not SharePoint document libraries. This next setting I would like to show you once again has to do with external sharing, and that is the ability to set up a duration for external sharing links. So let me first navigate to the sharing area under policies. All right, and it's not a kind of obvious here, but you need to click on this drop down, more external sharing settings, and you have some additional settings you can set up in here. And the settings I'm about to show you have to do with essentially with external sharing and putting a limit, all right, a time limit on those links. So these two checkboxes right here, it's kind of confusing, but the first one is essentially has to do with the ability to share the entire site. And this one has to do with the ability to share, maybe files or folders, right, where users authenticate through a verification code. So, for example, if you leave this unchecked, right, essentially, if you don't configure anything, then those links kind of never expire, but you can put a limit on them. For example, you want to say, when I'm sharing the site, it should be 30 days, and maybe when I'm sharing, maybe my essentially the files and folders. When users are sharing files and folders, it should be 15 days. And just don't forget to click save at the bottom to save your changes. But very important, of course, because we're setting this up within the admin center, those settings will apply to everyone. All right, so anyone within your tenant who is sharing externally, this would be the new thresholds for those links. This next feature might be unique as well, but let me first explain to you what this is all about. So in some cases, I have some clients who maybe want to see and track the ability who viewed a particular, maybe page or a document in SharePoint. Now, by default, this feature is not enabled. Actually, this is something a site owner has to enable on their sites. But once they do, here's the experience that they get. So, for example, let's say this is some sort of policy, and I want to see who maybe even looked at that particular, policy, that particular document. So they would click the checkbox, click this little eye in a circle, and once configured, you get this extra, essentially, option over here, and it tells me there were 6 views on this document, and it shows, the essentially the profile, right? The name of the user who viewed that particular document and when they viewed it. Now, if there were multiple users, let's say Mary or anyone else from my team, maybe clicked on this document, viewed the document, it would register their names and, timestamp in here as well. And this is something, like I said, site owners have to configure at the site level. I actually published an article on my blog and separate instructions on my YouTube channel, so feel free to check it out. But what I'm about to show you is how to disable this capability. For example, for privacy reasons, you do not want your site owners to even enable this feature. You can actually, being the SharePoint admin, you can actually disable it so the users, the site owners do not even have a chance of enabling this feature and tracking, their employees. So here's how you do it. You go to the SharePoint Admin Center. And I'm actually already here, but let me show you from the beginning where you have to navigate. You have to navigate to sharing under policies and scroll all the way to the bottom right here under other settings. And by default, essentially this checkbox you will see is already enabled. Let site owners choose to display the names of people who viewed files or pages in SharePoint. That feature I just described, but you can change that, all right? You can uncheck the box and click Save. And what will happen, essentially, the users, the site owners, I should say, will not be able to pretty much configure and enable this setting on their own sites. That will be off limits to them. The next setting I would like to show you, once again, has to do with external sharing. To be precise, it has to do with anyone links, those anonymous links that the users can generate. I remember a little bit earlier, right, I showed you how to essentially configure the ability for anyone links. In case if you do allow anyone anonymous links, there is an additional setting you can implement to make them a little bit more secure, because anyone link, anonymous link by default is not that secure, right? Essentially, I can, if users generate anyone anonymous link, you will never know who viewed or modified your content because it doesn't require the users to log in. With that being said, you can actually make those anyone links a little bit more secure. Let me show you how. So under policies sharing, same screen, same page, you need to scroll down. And over here, choose expiration and permissions option for anyone links. So first, what we can do, by default, once again, those links do not expire, but we can say, all anonymous links will expire in 15 days. You can also set up permissions, essentially, for anytime somebody generates anyone links, by default, it defaults to view and edit. But you know what? You can actually say, anytime somebody generates those anyone anonymous links, the highest privilege they can give is the ability to view. So at least in this particular case, nobody will be able to make any changes, right? At least you will never know who looked at the documents, but at the same time, none of those documents will be changed, modified by anonymous users. And there are two different settings, as you can see, for files and folders. You can do the same with files, with folders. So, or maybe with folders, you do maybe allow the ability to view, edit, and upload, but maybe for files you would leave it at view, so something like that. But as you can see, there are some additional settings you can tweak here to make the anyone links a bit more secure. This next setting has to do with the ability to set up a site and register a site as a home site. And this typically would be true for your, let's say, intranet, site, right? Similar to what you see on the screen right now. And when you register a site as a home site, it actually gets a number of privileges. It becomes like the most important site in your environment. The news posts you create on the home site will be front and center. The site will also be kind of accessible through the SharePoint app bar. In addition, once you configure a site as a home site, you can include it in and set up Viva connections, which will allow you to essentially embed your home site inside of your Microsoft Teams application. So there are a number of benefits when you register a site as a home site. Let me now show you how to configure a site as a home site. For that, we once again need to navigate to the Admin Center. This is actually set up from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. What's interesting is that if you have a SharePoint admin role, that's enough for you to set it up. You don't need to be a Microsoft 365 global admin. However, the settings, right, the actual setup does occur within the Microsoft 365 Admin Center and not SharePoint Admin Center. The next thing you would need to do is click on Settings under Viva. And right here, right, there are a few options related to Viva. We're interested in Viva connections. And right here, create and manage Viva Connections experiences. Now, I already set it up in my environment. By default, this section will be blank, and you will just need to create new and essentially set up a site as a home site using this, particular option over here. It actually tells me over here, by default, you can only have out of the box, you can only have one home site, but in case maybe you're part of a multinational corporation and maybe you want different, home sites for different offices, different regions, you would just need to set up to purchase additional licenses. But that's essentially the way you set it up, all right? Just like that, you just kind of follow the prompts, set up the URL, and your site will become essentially a home site. The last setting that we're going to configure within the SharePoint Admin Center has to do with branding, and specifically branding of the sign-in page. What you see right now on the screen is essentially the sign-in page that users see when they sign in to utilize, SharePoint or any other Microsoft 365 services. By default, it's just pretty much the default Microsoft branding. However, you can also configure it with your own, essential experience and your own company logo and background image as well. Let me show you how to do that. So this is actually a setting that is configured in Microsoft Entra ID, formerly Azure ID. So you do need to have access to that particular admin center for this particular use case. From the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, we click on Identity. Once you are within the Microsoft Entra Admin Center, you want to click under User Experiences, Company Branding. And this is essentially where you configure the background, the logo, and everything for that sign-in, page. I already configured this. As a matter of fact, once again, I have step-by-step instructions on my blog and my YouTube channel. But let me just show you. So obviously when you create it for the first time, you would need to create a brand new kind of experience, but let me edit the one I already created. So here it is. As you can see, you can specify quite a few, things, your background image, the logo that appears, and so on. There are also some additional settings as well in terms of the layout of the sign-in page. And so on. But long story short, this is the area where it is configured. And once you do configure this, essentially the users will get to see the branded version of the sign-in page, which in my opinion is great from user adoption standpoint. So this were the admin settings that I typically configure for my clients when I build internet portals and document management systems and just any types of sites in the environment. Hopefully you found this video useful and informative. As always, happy to see you on my blog, SharePointMaven.com, as well as my YouTube channel. Thank you very much and have a great rest of the day. Goodbye.